All right.
Details.
Last week we talked about the construction of the ark, and I left out a few fine details that we'll go over real quick. Let's talk to the boss, and then we'll get into our study. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to study your word. We ask today that you'll open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts so that we can see, hear, and understand, so that we can come to a knowledge, have the wisdom, and gain the understanding of what your word has to say. We thank you for it. In the name of Yeshua. One of the things that kind of piqued my curiosity about last week's study is we were talking about the construction of the ark. And we were saying, well, it's 300 cubits long, it's 50 cubits wide, and it's 30 cubits tall. And the thing that I really couldn't put a whole lot of a connection to was why they used the word Amah for a cubit. This word, Amah, means mother. So it kind of threw me off. Okay, why are we using mother as a measurement, a unit of measure? And so I went and I looked at the Proto-Hebrew, and okay, the Proto-Hebrew of this is, it's got an aleph, and then it's got a mem. And I looked at it, okay, and I said, well, you know, aleph and a mem, it says strong water. It means glue. It means something that binds. There's a bond that takes place within these measurements. And we said, okay, 300 represents, we said the shin that has the numerical value of 300. That there's two sides of shin. That there's the front side that represents Elohim's point of view, and there's the back side that represents our carnal point of view, and that in length, the word wasn't necessarily a measurement of distance, but a measurement of time, that we could relate that to our lives, and within the measurement of our lives, we have to come to an understanding of what side of shin are we on. Okay, so I can say, well, I have to bind myself to the word. The ark represents word. So I could say, okay, that. And then we had the same thing we had 50, which was the numerical value of nun, which, okay, nun represents life. It represents the soul. And the word for broad is a word that represents to grow large. So that within that period of time, I have to be able to grow large, not only physically, but also spiritually. So I said, well, okay, well, again, you know, I bind myself to the word. And then it all, you know, we kind of tied it together. That's a pretty bad lamed there. It's like a sick 3. So we bound it together with lamed, that's saying that I rise up towards Elohim through his instruction. So, but I still had a problem with why do they use the word mother for cubit? And then I was reading in a book called the Sefer Yetzirah that kind of brought a whole lot of understanding. There are 3 letters in Hebrew that are called the mothers. There is the aleph, the mem, and the resh. Okay? So, all right. Aleph, mem, and resh. Why are they called mothers? Well, that doesn't make any sense now either. And then I finally discovered that mother equates to understanding. So within the mothers, the ideas of what these are doing for me is it's bringing me into an understanding of my relationship with Yehovah Elohim, bringing me into an understanding of His Word, and also bringing me into an understanding of His authority. So if I take that over here, then I understand that I have to walk within the Word and the authority of Elohim. I have to live within the authority of my Elohim. And then I have to learn from the Word in regards to the authority of my Elohim. Then I said, okay. But then something else hit me in the word broad. The word broad, the Sefer Yetzirah pointed to Psalm 119:26, where it says, broad is our understanding. And then I got to, okay, now I understand, no pun intended, that broad is to understand which one is the front side, which one is the back side. To understand my relationship with Elohim, His authority, through His Word. So there was a whole lot more that we could glean from those measurements within the ark. And something else that got me was that there were 3 floors. There was the bottom floor, the second floor, and the third floor, and that the light was to be 1 cubit below the top. So the light actually didn't reach the top, it was still below the top. And what, again, reading in the Sefer Yetzirah, he said, oh, of course. We have what we call da'at, knowledge. How do we get our knowledge? We open the book, we read the book. We read the book, and then along comes an opportunity to apply what we've read in the book to a situation. Well, this raises this knowledge up to the second level, which is chokhmah, is wisdom. I see that I have the knowledge. I know where to apply it. And when this raises to the second level, it raises us to the third level. Again, in Binah is understanding. So I can read the Word, and I can have a knowledge of Elohim. I can increase my knowledge to where I have wisdom of Elohim. Wisdom is somewhere between knowledge and understanding, but it's not actually being applied. But as I grow in my relationship with my experience, I raise up to I have an understanding of Elohim. But still, the light is still between Binah and the roof, which is Keter. Keter means crown. When we understand, we come into the presence of the light. But everything from here and on down, there's more things below this, are still within the realm of what's called Sof. Sof is a word that means it has a boundary. Elohim is nowhere within here because He is above this as what's called Ein Sof, which means without boundaries. He's the eternal one. So what the ark is telling us is that everything in our lives depends on where our learning raises us up. But it's not just about learning. Learning, we come into the contact with the knowledge. But until we have the wisdom from what we've learned to be able to apply it to gain understanding, we're still not closer to the light. So in the levels within the ark, we see that as a level, basically a staircase taking us into a tighter, closer relationship with our Elohim without ever actually coming into His presence. Because the Word says no one has ever seen the face of Elohim. Moses was looking up to see His backside, and Elohim kind of moved him into a crevice so that he wouldn't grab a big glimpse of that so that he wouldn't die. So within the ark, now we have a fully rounded idea that it's there for us to go in, to help us to come into a deeper relationship with our Elohim and begin to rise up in His direction in our walk. So that pretty much wiped out the first paragraph. So tonight I had 4 verses listed out for tonight because I wanted to do the animals tonight. But when I got into this verse, I realized that, well, we might talk about this verse before we talk about animals and humans. This one here kind of takes both animals and humans and puts them together into an idea that we can take with us and apply it to our lives. This is chapter 6, verse 19 of Bereshit, that says, "And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shall you bring into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." Okay, so we read it as a story. It says, we're going to go out and get all living flesh, male and female of all the animals, and we're going to bring it into the ark. The only thing is that this particular verse doesn't say anything about animals. It says, "And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shall you bring into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." So of every living thing, it's talking about both human and animal, but something else that we bring into the word. In the word every, we have a word kol that means, well, it means everything, but it also means totally. It also means completely. So it gives us an idea that of all that makes us who we are, both physical as well as spiritual, this word gives us an idea that everything that we are, both physical and spiritual, that is our makeup. Everybody with me? Okay. All right. So we get a clearer picture of this concept in the words living thing that make up the word chachai. This word literally means the life. So we consider in saying every living thing, we're actually relaying the idea of the totality of life that is contained within the flesh. Okay? The totality of the life that is contained within the flesh. We haven't distinguished between animals and people, but we're starting to get an idea that this is something that's talking about both spiritual and physical properties within all of us. Now, so we can consider that saying every living thing, we're actually relaying the idea of the totality of life that is contained in every living, within the living flesh. The word basar, this word means flesh, both animal and human. It comes from a singular root that means to bear news and to receive news. So it comes from a similar root. The root is actually also basar. It's just a slightly different pronunciation and a slightly different vowing that turns it from meaning the flesh of humans and animals to meaning news or bad news. So we take this, and that now we see 2 of every sort. We have 2 different kinds of situations that affect our lives. The flesh feels anxiety in some issues, and in other issues we feel joy. So what do we do with them? It says, "You shall bring them into the ark." Now, last week we looked at the word ark and we came to some considerations that it meant a box, and that Rashi said it meant something in which something finds protection, and that Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer said that it actually meant the Word. So the ark, we get the idea of the Word now. So when we say you shall bring into the ark, we're saying we shall bring into the Word. And we take those things that concern us into the Word to receive direction so that we receive back the life that is drained from us. and bring into the Word those things that can bring us joy. As we recite psalms of praise. In essence, we're sharing our joy with Elohim. What are we doing? We have an issue. What's the first thing that the flesh tells us to do when we have an issue? Resolve it. What ideas can you manufacture in your head to fix this problem? What this is telling us is that there's more than simply what ideas can I manufacture in my head to fix the problem. We've said from our studies of Torah to this point that every situation that we can encounter is found within Torah. So we take our problem into the Word. We get into the Word and find our problem. And then it tells us what to do about our problem in so many words. It may not be the exact words that we expect to read. It may be something, a story that kind of has the problem under the surface. That's where our discernment comes in. But also we go into the Word when we have an issue simply to open the Psalms, open the Proverbs, and find an opportunity to praise. Because Elohim inhabits our praise, and if we find praise, then we find His joy, and then we share that joy between us. Then we're able to go back and resolve our issue. Everybody with me? Good, because I've lost myself. Okay. This takes us to the results of doing this in the phrase, to keep them alive with you. Okay, so we're going to take the flesh into the ark so that we can keep them alive. The anchor of this phrase is lechayot. And as it shares the same root as chaya, we find that this word also means to revive from discouragement and to restore to life. In other words, we receive back the life that was drained from us, as we said above, as well as to live prosperously and to continue to live. In other words, we bring into the words those things that bring us joy. So we see that it starts to work in that the Word can restore us and revive us, but it can also bring us joy to where we rise above that feeling of anxiety that we had. This is what keeps us alive. Because too many problems, too much anxiety, too much of anything can really make us very sick spiritually, to the point that we can die spiritually if we don't keep it maintained. So we see the importance of going into the ark, and it's a whole lot more than simply taking some animals in there to keep alive. So let's see. Now, the word for male here is zakar. Its origin is a similar root, and it means to remember, to recall, and to call to mind. We do this in our study of the Word of Elohim, and Elohim does these when we take the time to speak with Him. What does zakar mean? It means to remember. It means to call to mind. What happens when we study the Word? We remember what Elohim says. We remember His Word. We remember what He's done. We remember what He's told us to do and not to do. But in the same time, when we read the Word, we are able to remind Him that this is what you said. And then He's reminded, and He remembers, and He begins to act on what He said in our lives. So sometimes it's not simply praying something. We've seen in the past, in our studies and in the scriptures, that Elohim sometimes has to be reminded, because the word says, and Elohim remembered. So we remind Him of where we are, and He recalls it. So the word for female here is unekeva, which comes from the root nakab, which means to pierce or to penetrate. Well, that sounds pretty good. Now, the interesting thing, there we go. The interesting thing is the Proto-Hebrew of Nakab, if I can find my doodad.
Nakab